I got a cold or something today in the morning because where I live, the weather changed dramatically from day to day. I just got this cold and I've been sneezing and very snotty throughout the day. But nonetheless, anyways, we're here and very much ready and excited for this new topic. All right, so we are live and let us start with our class. Let me show you here my screen and we're going to be able to, as I say, have a very good excursus in this. Well, here you have my screen where we are. Yeah. All right. Awesome. Well, as you can see, first thing you're going to notice, it says integrated question. Now, of course, this is familiar for you because the second, the third, and the fourth task, as I told you, are integrated tasks. All of them are integrated tasks. Therefore, of course, all of them are very much similar. They are almost identical, I would say. And well, here you have one more time the picture and the image of our journalist, our dear journalist, that reminds us it's very important in this task, that is an integrated task, to never say our opinion or to add any external detail to the information that ETS gives us as information source. But what we have to do instead is to imitate what journalists normally do. And what do journalists normally do? Well, very simple. What they normally do is to receive information from some source or information source they receive. They take notes on that information, and they simply summarize that information afterwards in order to offer that summary as what? As their final work to their audience. Now, that is exactly what you have to do. And remember that a good journalist never corrupts his information, right? He always remains very much attained to the topic, and that is what you have to do. Now, for those of you who are just joining us, we are starting with a new task in the speaking section. And basically what we have said is that this is an integrated task, and therefore it's similar to the other ones we have seen. As we have the picture of the journalist here, we are reminded that we don't have to give your opinion, and we don't have to give our opinion, excuse me, and we don't have to mention what we think about this topic or to add any external detail of our own to the information here presented, because that is not what we are expected to do. The only thing we have to do is, as if we were journalists, to summarize the information sources we receive. And that is exactly what I wanted to comment here, because if you remember in the third task and in the second task, you always had two information sources to summarize. But in this case, this response is so easy, or is as easy that, well, such easy, I think is the expression, the correct expression this time. This task is such easy that in this case, as I say, dear students, the only information source that you have to summarize is a lecture. I know it sounds quite lame, but well, that is exactly what it is. This is a task that doesn't require you to listen or to read to both information sources as in the past. But in this case, the only thing you have to receive and to listen in this case is a lecture on an academic topic delivered by a professor that is recorded, and you listen to it through your headphones. No more than that. You listen to that lecture. There's going to be, well, a class recorded on topics like physics, mathematics, biology, medicine, computer science, anything that you can think of and say, well, this could be taught in a university. This could be part of a class in, let's say, Harvard or in my local university. Then tell me that it's a possible and very much plausible topic you could receive in this exam. The fourth task is going to present you a lecture, and that lecture is going to be your information source. When you receive that information source, you're going to listen to that lecture, you're going to take notes while listening, and your only task is to summarize such lecture in order to present a response in 1 minute, summarizing all the information you have received. Always remembering, never including your own information or your own ideas into the summary, but the summary must remain very much stick to the topic. It must be very much, let's say, loyal to the information as it has been presented before. Don't alter it, don't change it, right? Present it just as you receive it with their own words, of course. That is a summary, right? So that is it. Okay, that's it. No more than that. That is what the fourth task is all about. And here you have the time. As you can see here, dear students, well, your timing changes a little bit. With consideration to the second one. What is the first difference? Well, that the lecture in this case is going to be a bit longer. If you remember, the lectures or the audios in the previous two questions or the previous two tasks lasted for approximately 1 minute. Nonetheless, this is going to last for approximately 2 minutes, right? 2 minutes and a little bit more, sometimes 2 minutes and a half, things of that sort. But as I say, the lecture is going to be a little bit longer, not very much, don't worry. The complexity is going to be the same, by the way, about an academic subject. We have said this last week, so I think that you are very much aware and familiarized with this type of material. Apart from that, how much time are you going to have to prepare your response? Well, as you can see here, 20 seconds. There is a difference with regard to the first, to the third task, that in this case, you have to, you have 10 seconds less than in the third task. And well, I think that is in order to compensate a little bit the easiness and the facility that ETS is giving you. Well, in this case, just offering one information source to summarize, and they want to compensate that to make it, let's say, more difficult by, of course, lessening and diminishing the amount of time you have for preparing your response. That, as you can see, has been diminished 10 seconds. Before, you had 30 seconds in order to prepare your response. Now you have 20. Well, that is the scenario. Anyways, I think it's sufficient, especially because, as I say, it's only one information source. Therefore, to organize your ideas must be not a process of more than 10 seconds, and let's say the 10 remaining for mentalizing yourself. But apart from that, fantastic. Last thing, how much time, are you going to have in order to summarize your material? Well, 60 seconds. As you can see, that is all time you're going to have. 60 seconds, 1 minute, just as it was also the case in the first and in the second task. All right, fantastic. Well, now I want to give you some time for you to make some general questions about what we have seen here in the first slides. Some questions here, students, about the information that I have mentioned up to this point. Please tell me. I am going to be delighted to help you. Any question, anything? Sarah, Alexander, Angel, Andrea, Jasmine, Paula, Santiago, Mateo, Andrea, questions?
No questions on mine.
Okay, fantastic, Jasmine. What about the rest of you guys? Questions?
I'm good. Thank you, Carlos.
Thank you very much, Andrea. There you are. Okay. I think no questions then. Fantastic. Well, let's continue. What are we going to do right now? Well, following our tradition, I'm going to show you 2 illustrations for you to get this task a little bit deeper. Well, let's get into that first illustration. Here I have a lecture, as you can see, of 2 minutes duration, and we're going to listen to this while taking notes, as you know, and then we're going to use those notes as material for us to compare our responses after I show you one response that I recorded myself for this question. Okay, so please let us listen to this lecture, and please, as I say, always pay attention to the professor's tone of voice. Pay attention to how the professor spends more time on some topics. You're going to understand why, but as I say, pay attention.
Now listen to part of a lecture from an economics class.
Today we're going to talk about a microeconomic concept referred to as opportunity cost. This concept speaks about the potential loss or gain from potential alternatives when one choice or course of action is taken over others. In its simplest form, the opportunity cost is the loss of the benefit that would have been enjoyed had a particular choice not been taken. This feeds back into the concept of scarcity that we discussed in the previous class. The idea that resources, such as time or money, are finite, and therefore choosing one thing often means not choosing something else. All of you guys are familiar with this concept. It applies to our daily lives as well. when we're selecting a movie to watch. Say, the opportunity cost is whatever else we could have done during those 2 hours. As students, many of you could have used those 2 hours to do further study for your exams, say, or worked a couple of hours at a shop. You could even have watched another movie. I'm sure all of you have watched films before and thought, what a stinker. So, how does this relate to business? Well, businesses have 2 types of costs: explicit costs and implicit costs. Let's imagine, for instance, that a company needs to buy $200 of office supplies and sends one of its workers out to procure them. The explicit cost is the $200 for the office supplies. The implicit cost is the money the company paid the employee while he was performing that task. The company would have had to pay that employee whether he purchased those supplies or not, but he would have been doing an alternative task instead. Therefore, this activity has implicit costs of both time and money. What could the employee have achieved instead during the time he spent at Staples buying ink cartridges? Whatever that might have been is therefore the opportunity cost.
There you are. Fantastic. Well, as you can see, a lecture not different, at least with regard to complexity, grammar, or expressions, as the ones that we have seen before in the second task and especially in the third task. The only difference is longer. Nonetheless, well, as it is the only material you have to pay attention to, I think it's quite manageable, right? Well, let us continue. Now, imagine that 20 seconds of preparation have already happened. I have prepared my response. I have outlined my structure, and of course, I'm going to share with you, don't worry. And also, I have decided what information to include in my response or summary and what information to dispense with. So after all that process, it's time for a response. So let us listen to how I responded to this question. Here we have, let's listen to this first illustration.
In this lecture, we've been presented to the fascinating topic of opportunity cost, that is the value of every good when compared to what could have been done with the same good alternatively. Now, the professor gives an example of the real world when he says that if his students watch a 2-hour movie, what they could have done with the same amount of time would be their opportunity cost. They could have watched another movie or they could have done their assignments. Moving this into the business world, the professor says that companies have 2 types of costs, that is to say, the explicit ones and the implicit ones. If a company requires its employee to go and get a $300 supply, those $300 would be the explicit cost, but those $200 that the company may pay its employee to go and get them would be the implicit ones. And this would be also opportunity cost because they have to consider what that is a specific employee could have done for the same amount of money.
Great. Well, was somehow cut at the end, but anyways. Well, as you can see, that will be my response for this question. Well, it is not different to the responses that I have delivered and that you have also delivered for the third task of the speaking section. It's basically a summary of the material. Of course, my introductory phrase and the structure has been altered a little bit. Nonetheless, apart from that, it's basically the same process. And if you notice, the same, let's say, measures are also taken for this particular task. Never mentioning my opinion, never adding anything of my own knowledge. For example, here, I am somebody that likes to read very much this type of topics about economics. I am a very assiduous reader of this type of books. Nonetheless, I didn't mention anything, right? I could have mentioned something. Nonetheless, I didn't do it because I know that the TOEFL exam doesn't allow me to do so in this particular task. Therefore, I avoided doing so. That is my recommendation for you. Avoid offering your opinion, your own knowledge and data in this task. Trust me that there are going to be some points and safe places for you to do that later on during the TOEFL exam. But nonetheless, for now, the scenario remains like that. Not recommendable nor actually allowed to offer your opinion. Okay, fantastic. Let's get into the second illustration. Let us listen now to a lecture on marine biology, if I'm not wrong. And well, this is going to be a little bit more complicated, maybe with regard to the technical words and expressions. Nonetheless, let's see what we can get from this lecture.
Let's continue our discussion of animal adaptations by talking about special features that make it possible for certain fish to survive in the deepest part of the ocean, a place where almost no light reaches. Specifically, I'm going to talk about two very different features. All right, to start with, some deep sea fish have large tube-shaped eyes that always point upwards. One such species is known as the spookfish. These fish live thousands of meters below the surface of the ocean in almost total darkness. However, since their unique eyes point upward at all times, they have the ability to spot the faint outlines of fish swimming above them in parts of the ocean where a little light can reach. Once they spot such fish, they quickly swim upwards and eat them. I should also mention that their eyes are really huge, so they are able to detect even extremely tiny fish passing above. Next up is a type of fish that is able to create its own light. The lanternfish has a series of tiny organs throughout its body that give off light thanks to a chemical process called bioluminescence. Actually, this is the same chemical reaction that many different sea and land animals use to produce light. Anyways, the lanternfish can make itself bright enough to attract the attention of other fish in its surrounding area. If these fish are small enough, they become prey for the lanternfish. This makes it a very efficient hunter, despite the darkness of its natural environment. Interestingly, they can even use this special light to protect themselves from other organisms by matching the intensity of light coming from above. This makes it much harder for potential predators to spot them from below.
There you are. Well, a second lecture, in this case, maybe more complex, depending on your scientific and academic endeavors, nonetheless. Well, now that we have listened to this lecture, let us get into the response, right? Imagine then that the 20 seconds have happened. I have prepared my response. Now it's time for us to listen to how I responded. Okay, so please, as I say, pay attention to my introduction, pay attention to the elements in the middle of my response, pay attention to how I concluded. I think those elements are very much important. Okay, let's go.
In this lecture, we've been presented to the fascinating topic of features helping fishes to survive deep in the ocean's darkness. The professor mentions there is one fish called the spookfish that by having eyes always looking upwards can perceive some prey above in the only perceivable strokes of light and then to hunt them. Furthermore, the professor mentions that the lanternfishes that have bioluminescence can produce such an effect through internal organs. They are able, by this specific phenomena, to attract some prey, and when they are confused, they hunt them. They also can protect themselves by the same mechanism by matching the brightness of the environment and thus confusing those predators that are trying to hunt them.
Well, great. There you are. Fantastic. Well, if you notice, actually, in this case, I didn't use the entireness of a minute. And that is quite normal. I think that you have also discovered in your practice that you don't always use the entire minute because sometimes, well, your information or what you consider to be important and relevant to your summary has been fully mentioned without using the entire time, and that is quite well. As I told you, I never recommend to offer a conclusion. I think it's not worth the risk, and especially I think it's not beneficial, it's not advantageous, especially because, well, as I say, it's not something like, well, novel. I mean, it's not something, let's say, productive at the end because you're not adding anything new, right, to the response that you have not mentioned before in your summary. Apart from that, well, of course, it's up to you to mention a conclusion if you want to use your remaining time with some sort of activity. Well, now that we have listened to these illustrations, I think it's a very good moment for me to show you the template that I was following and the one that I recommend you as well to follow. So here you have it. Very similar to the one of the third task. Now, of course, there are some variations here, but apart from that, not very much has been altered. Let's see, we have also 4 steps, as you can see. Well, that is the magic number of these templates. The first step basically consists in an introductory phrase, as we have done before. In this case, it's in this lecture, we've been presented to the fascinating topic of, and then you continue. Now, maybe you're wondering, why am I using fascinating here? Well, I have to confess the first reason is merely aesthetic. I think that fascinating sounds very good, especially because fascinating, of course, has its origin in Latin, and all these words that have its origin in Latin are very similar in Spanish as well, right? Fascinante. So I think it's actually quite, it sounds better in English when you use these words that have this Latin origin. They sound very well, and I think that in this lecture we've been presented to the fascinating topic of, sounds very good. Of course, as I told you, this is not written on rock, as my professor says. When I am in the university, he says this is not written on rock. Yeah, I mean, you can change it, you can alter this whenever you want, especially in the wording, right? Because maybe some of you consider this to be too basic. You want something more complex, you can add more I don't know, complex and advanced vocabulary, or to make more emphasis on words that or structures and grammar. Fantastic, do it. All right, you're very much free and encouraged to do so. The first step. After you finalize this, in this lecture, we've been presented to the fascinating topic of, is can you see here? It basically forces you to mention the title, right, of the lecture, and that is exactly what I did. In this lecture, we've presented to the fascinating topic of opportunity costs, or in the second illustration, we've been presented to the fascinating topic of, in this case, it was mechanisms that help fish to survive deep in the ocean's darkness, right? Well, that would be the first step. In this lecture, we've been presented to the fascinating topic of, and then you mention the title. Well, after you finalize this, you move on to the second step. First lecture's point and illustration. As you can see here, is where you start and begin with your summary. Now, the only reason why I have clarified this second and third and fourth step, well, it's actually because of that, of clarification purposes. Because, well, I mean, in your summary, you know what you have to do, but nonetheless, remember, it's very important that your summary includes all the points made in the lecture. Remember the third task when we discussed this, and some of you were wondering, should I mention all the points made in the lecture? And I told you, yes, you should mention all the points made in the lecture. Doesn't matter if there are more than 2, because normally I said, I don't know, maybe 70% of the time, professors merely give 2 arguments or 2 points in their lectures. Nonetheless, sometimes they want to offer more. They're very much, I don't know, kind and, let's say, excited on that day. Therefore, they give more information, they mention more points and more illustrations, etc. Nonetheless, if in this case you have 2, 3, 1 point, mention it. And also, if you notice, as I told you here in the points made in the lectures, professors normally also offer illustrations, and they do so for a very simple reason. Have you ever thought about why I always show you illustrations before we get into the template? Well, because I want you to catch and to receive and to absorb the information I am sharing with you more easily, because illustrations actually help for that purpose, to absorb information in a very much associative manner, or yeah, I would say so. So my idea is, as I say, always include the illustrations that professors also include in their lectures. For example, if you remember my first illustration when I show you the lecture about opportunity costs, then you remember that the professor said, right, opportunity cost is basically what you could have done instead of any particular activity, right? And then he gave an example. He said, if you watch a 2 hours long movie, what you could have done instead is your opportunity cost. You could have, for example, he gave 3 different illustrations. He said, you could have, for example, you could have gone with your friends to have some fun, You could have, for example, watch a movie. You could have, for example, I don't know, something like you could have, oh, he said, right? You could have worked in the coffee shop for 2 hours. He gave 3 examples. Now, if you think about it, in my response, when I was summarizing that topic at that point, when he talked about what is it, that is to say, what is the opportunity cost, and I started to mention the illustrations the professor gave, I just offered one of those illustrations. I didn't mention the 3 of them. I just mentioned the one that talked about going out with your friends, but I didn't talk about watching another movie or going to the coffee shop, etc. Right? Just talked about my friends. That is to say, going out with your friends. That is fine. Sometimes you have to do it because you're gonna notice that illustrations in some points in the lectures are simply not too relevant. And as this is a very, very limited time for a lot of information, you have to decide what to include. But as I say, at least include one illustration among all the illustrations, because as I say, there are several the professor is going to offer, okay? But include lectures points and illustration in that order, okay? Because the points are made and then comes the illustration or the illustrations. But I wouldn't say that a good idea would be to say, let's say, well, I'm gonna say all the points like the professor talked about this, this, and this, and then you offer the illustrations. I think that is not too compelling because when you think about it, the most natural way to organize this is the point and the illustration that accompany that point. Second point and the illustration that accompany the second point, and third point and the illustration that accompany the third point, and so on and so forth. So as I say, better if you follow this structure in that sense. Point, illustration, point, illustration, point, illustration. Trust me, professors always give points and illustrations. So you just have to include them in your summary. And with that, you're going to be doing just fine. Okay. Well, is there any question with regard to the template, your students, to the structure? Tell me. I'm going to be glad to help you. Andrea, Jasmine, Alexander, Angel, Paola, Santiago, Mateo, Andrea, or Kevin. Questions?
I don't have any question. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Andrea. A pleasure. There you are. Great. I think there are no more questions. And if there are no more questions, I think that we can continue. Or no questions? I guess no. Great. Well, now that we have said this, as you can see, I'm going to give you some recommendations, some hacks for this task, okay? So first of all, for this section, dear students, you are going to receive a lot of information, okay? Trust me. A lot of scientific data. Therefore, your minute is maybe not going to be sufficient for you to include it all. That is why you must be very savvy, clever, intelligent, right? To include just that information that stands as the central point made in the lecture. I think that you have experienced this because, well, this lecture is large, it's very much long. Therefore, when you receive so many information, as in this case, your mind can be overwhelmed and you are going to be in the circumstance of having to decide, what should I include? What should I dispense with? Because of course, it's not possible to include every single word of the lecture. And that is very good because if you did so, then that wouldn't be a summary, right? Because a summary is exactly the contrary. It's not saying every single word you have to listen, but let's say diminishing and let's say lessening that information by your own words. Now, you have to decide, as I say, what you have to include in your summary in order to make it efficient, what you have to dispense with, what you have to leave out of the response, right? That's what you have to do. So let me give you some feedback and, well, not feedback here, some hacks, some tips for you to include in your response, okay? For knowing what to include in your response, I think better said. So here you have it. The way you're going to identify those elementary points is by looking at the following traits. Let us discuss them. First thing, how much time the professor actually spends on this specific topic. If little, then you can dispense with it. I think this is quite natural, right? When we are, let's say, exposing a very long topic, we do not normally spend a lot of time in irrelevant and secondary matters. We always invest and dedicate the best of our time in the topics that, of course, require more attention because they are elementary and main ideas. Therefore, if you notice that your professor spends a long time in a particular point, I think that is definitely something that you should include in your response. Why? Well, because as I told you, when you are emphasizing something, investing more time there, I think it's because you are somehow conveying the idea, the perception that, well, that particular point or element is important. Okay, so if you notice that your professor spends a lot of time on one particular topic in comparison to other topics or points, include it. Okay, include it in your summary. Secondly, how much you can understand a lecture without a specific topic. Let me please explain this in my words. So it could happen, your students, when you're deciding in those 20 seconds what to include and what not to include in your response, always ask yourself this question. Okay, listen to me. Ask yourself the following. Say, if I don't include this idea or point, is my reviewer going to understand my summary? I repeat, if I don't include this idea in my summary, is my reviewer going to understand that? If you respond yes to that question, then don't include that idea in your summary and your response. Why? Because you are admitting to yourself, well, if I don't include it, nobody's going to notice it. The reviewer is not going to notice it because it is not relevant for my summary to be understood. And remember that basically the objective of summaries is to be clear and to be understandable, because you want people to get information or knowledge in a very concise and rapid manner. Therefore, if you ask yourself, if I include this, is my reviewer still going to understand it? And you respond yes, don't include it, because as I say, it's not relevant. It's not that important for the summary. If it is the case that when you don't include it, nobody notices it. Okay, nobody notices it. Well, that's it. Now, last part. If you ask yourself that question, you say, if I don't include this information in my summary, is my reviewer going to notice it? And you respond to yourself, oh yes, he's going to notice it because this is very important and nobody's going to understand my summary. If I don't include this, then include the summary, or excuse me, include the information. Because there are some points, there are some things in the lecture that if we don't include them, the lecture simply stands empty. It stands very difficult to understand. It stands very much difficult to identify because, well, as I mentioned, your students, it's like there is something lacking there. A very important piece in that puzzle is not being included. So as I say, ask yourself that. Is my reviewer going to understand my summary if I don't include this? If you say, no, he's not going to be able to include it, or excuse me, to understand it, so include it. All right, include the information, as I say. If you ask yourself, is my reviewer going to understand this if I don't include this element or point? If you respond yourself, yes, he is going to understand it, don't include it. But if you respond to yourself, no, he's not going to understand it, so include it. As I say, okay, that is a very good manner to identify when to include a topic. All right. And final recommendation. As this will be a long response about a single topic, try to include varied intonation throughout your response for you to make it interesting to your reviewer. By doing this, you will keep him always concentrated and transmit him the feeling that you will be able to be a great expositor in a university. Remember that at least implicitly, well, not very much explicitly, but implicitly. Sorry. This task is basically elaborated for you to demonstrate that you're able to make expositions, presentations in a university setting or in a labor setting. Because when you are working for a company, there are some times in which you are assigned to make a presentation, right? And you have to discuss this in English to expose, etc., etc. The same for your presentations in university. You have to make an exposition, you have to present something, well, you have to speak in front of a public. Now, as I say, dear students, your audience listens to you. Your audience receives what you say. And who is your audience in this case? Well, your reviewer is your audience. Now think about your reviewer for a while. He's a person, a human being, who whose profession is to do this for the entire day. He listens to a lot of information, a lot of passages, a lot of these audios as the ones you are offering to him. So probably he's gonna get a little bit bored. He's gonna get a little bit exhausted. And if you speak in a very, let's say, boring and not attractive manner, like today I'm gonna discuss the topic about marine biology that says the mechanisms are actually not very interesting. Well, I mean, of course, it is very difficult not to get sleepy, right? So as I say, nonetheless, if you use here your skills and make your presentation with regard to your tone of voice, with your pitch, with your intonation, something very much, let's say, awry and unstable, you make it attractive to your reviewer, well, you are not going to have that complication. He's going to listen to you, very much interested in what you're saying. And of course, as I say, it conveys and transmits the idea that you are a good expositor, and that is exactly what they're trying to demonstrate through this task, all right? So try to always offer, as I say, a lot of intonations, try to make a very much awry, use a silence sometimes, like saying, today I'm going to discuss this topic, right? I mean, following the structure, of course. The professor said the following. Nonetheless, he later remarked this, right? I mean, trying to make it a little bit attractive in that sense, at least aesthetic sense, is going to help you a lot, okay? To avoid those complications that I talked to you about at the beginning, okay? Because your reviewer is a person, is a human being, and he can be, of course, let's say, liable to this particular type of problems, okay? Well, is there any question, dear students, to these recommendations, clarifications that I could make? Please tell me. Yasmin, Andre, Alexander, Angel, Paula, Santiago, Mateo, Andrea, Kevin, questions?
Hello, Carlos.
Yes, Angel.
Respect is more related to the second advice. For example, following the structure, point illustration, point illustration, point illustration. In the hypothetical case, I got, for example, the 3 points, but I didn't get the, for example, the second illustration. Is recommended to omit the second point, or is preferred to mention the second point and not mention illustration, or what is preferred in this case?
All right. Thank you very much, Angel, for your question. Well, with regard to what you say, I would recommend you to definitely include the second point made in the lecture, even if you have not managed to grasp the illustration that was accompanying that particular point. Because points allow, for example, as I say, even if you don't manage to get the illustration that accompanied and was united to that point, not mentioning the point, I think, would be exactly what would make it noticeable. That is to say, if you include the point, right, but nonetheless you continue speaking as if anything had happened, and you don't omit that particular illustration or that particular point in this case, I think that, well, the reviewer is going to listen to it and is going to forget that you didn't mention the illustration. But if you don't mention the point, it's like, well, he's going to notice it super rapidly. Like, okay, he didn't mention this point, right? So why was that? And he's going to start to take some notes on that. But nonetheless, as I say, in the worst case scenario that you forgot or that you, well, didn't get very well the second point or the illustration of the second point, mention any of those elements that you have. That is to say, if you listen to the illustration but you forgot the point, better to mention the illustration at least, right? Or the other case, if you listen to the point made in the lecture, but you forgot or you didn't get the illustration, mention the point. Anyways, as I say, it's preferable to mention the entire structure of the lecture without omitting anything that could be very much noticeable, because if you don't include an entire element of the lecture, then it's quite noticeable that you are omitting something. And as I said, the reviewer is going to find that a little bit suspectful. So as I said, it's preferable to always include what you have managed to get from the lecture. Okay, dear Angel.
Yep. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. There you are. Any other question, dear students? Any other thing that I could clarify here? No questions? Great, no questions. So before we go, I have something for you. Practice. So we're gonna practice right now, although tomorrow is gonna be just for practicing this, but anyways, I just consider that it is wonderful how you are performing on this. So I just want to listen to your responses right now. Get a piece of paper near you, get your microphone. And tonight we're going to practice one exercise for this task. And tomorrow the entire class is going to be for you to receive personalized feedback. Nonetheless, right now, let us practice together, okay? Take your piece of paper, take your pencil, and let us listen to this lecture while taking notes, okay? Don't forget, it's very important. So let's go and start, please, listening to this lecture now.
All right, now that you all have microscopes at your tables, I want to explain how they work and how to use them. First of all, you should know that they are compound microscopes, so they can magnify objects up to 1,000 times their size. These microscopes have two systems, an illuminating system and an imaging system. You'll see that the illuminating system has a light source built in, and you can control it by adjusting the lever on the side. Why is this important? Well, the specimen must be pretty thin, or let's say transparent enough to let light pass through it. So the light source controls the amount of light that passes through the specimen. Okay, the other system provides magnification. Use this lever to switch powers. So when you switch to a higher power, you see a larger image. And when you switch to a lower power, you see a smaller image. But I should remind you that the field of view is smaller at a higher power. In other words, at a higher magnification, you see a larger image of a smaller area. Okay, so what about the focus? Well, these microscopes are parfocal, and that means you usually don't have to refocus when you switch to a higher or lower power of magnification. But there are two adjustment knobs, the larger one for coarse adjustment and the smaller one for fine adjustment, just in case.
Well,
Using the main points and examples from the talk, describe the two major systems of the laboratory microscope, and then explain how to use it.
there you are. Well, we have finalized with the lecture. And if you remember, you have 20 seconds to prepare your responses. Your students, all right? So please let us start doing so. Here we are. Okay, so please, all of you dear students, start preparing your responses now. Great, there you are. Now, please, who's going to start? Angel, please, dear Angel, you're going to start, okay, with this exercise. So, please, dear Angel, start delivering your response for this question now.
In this lecture, we have been presented the fascinating topic of microscopy. The professor mentioned two main pictures of the microscope. The first one is the illumination system. The professor says that this illumination controls the size of the thing we have been observed. Also, it controls the how we can see throughout the object. This controls the transparency. Also, another characteristic of a microscope is the magnification. While we had a higher power, we could say smaller things, but we cover a smaller area, and we can all these characteristics we can control the top. Also, she mentioned the focus as a third characteristic. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Angel. Very good. There you are. So, Andre, you're going to continue, right? So
Okay.
please, here, Andre, start responding to this question now.
Okay, in this lecture, we've been presented in topic of the characteristics and uses of microscopes. Sorry, these specific microscopes they're using in the lab are compound. This means that they can magnify the specimens 1,000 their normal size. These specific microscopes have two important features: the illuminating system, that is basically a source of light. This is useful because they are using transparent specimens, and also the magnification feature, which you can provide high power, which stands for larger images, or lower power, which in this case cause the image to look smaller. These microscopes are powerful.
Fantastic. Very, very good. Thank you, Andres. Very, very good. Fantastic. Okay, Jasmine, you're going to follow up. Please start responding to the question now.
Okay. In this lecture, we've been presented to the topic of explaining some features of a laboratory microscope. The teacher started explaining that it has two systems. The first is illuminated system. This is used for some thin specimen, and this system could control the light of the specimen and could be very helpful. The second system is magnification. This is used for larger and smaller images. And she ends saying that they are parfocals, so the microscope won't need to be refocused.
Great. Thank you, Jasmine. Fantastic. Dear Alexander, you're going to continue, all right? So please start delivering your response for this question now.
In this lecture, we've been presented to the fascinating topic of microscopes. So microscopes are equipment to magnify almost 1,000 times the real image. So microscopes have two principal systems: the illumination system and the optical system. The illumination system controls the intensity of the source of light. That's necessary because the light could be too high to see some thin or transparent species. The optical system is used to control the power of magnificence, and also have a focus system of control for have the two systems, one for big adjustment and also for small adjustment.
All right, thank you very much, dear Alexander. Fantastic. Paula, please, Paula, you're going to continue. All right. So please start responding to the question now.
In this lecture, we've been presented to the fascinating topic of microscopes, which have compound systems. The first system is the illuminating system, which you can control the intensity of light, and it's useful for is useful for thin and transparent specimens. The second system is the magnification, which helps to see larger or smaller images, helping to adjust the size of the objects. Finally, the microscopes are focused, so you don't have to switch them.
All right. Magnificent. Thank you very much, Paula. Very, very good. Santiago, you're going to continue, right? Please, you're Santiago. So please enable your microphone, help me with that, and start responding now.
In this lecture, we have been immersed in the topic of microscope, where we studied about the objective, structure, and characteristics of this item. First lecture's point and illustration, we can talk about two types of system of this item. The first one is the illumination, and the other is the magnification. In the first one, we use this system to make specimens more transparent. And in the other system, we use this type to make things more smaller or bigger for the study. In the second lecture point and illustration, we can talk about the focus, that it is not much used, but it can make things more larger or smaller to a better study.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Santiago. Fantastic. There you are. Andrea, please see Andrea. You're going to continue, right? So help me, please. Responding now.
Before I start, my networking isn't working well, so I don't know if my answer will be good.
No, I can listen to you very well. You're Andrea, don't worry.
Okay.
All right, so please start responding now.
Okay. In the listening part, we've been presented to the fascinating topic of the microscope. The professor mentioned which are the characteristics and how will students are going to use it. And it is said that it is a compound magnifying object, and it has two systems, the illumination system and the magnification. The first one, it said that it has the light source and it allows the light goes through the object. And the second one allows the students to zoom in and zoom out the object that they are studying.
There you are. Great. Thank you, Andrea. Fantastic. I listened to you very well. Kevin, you're going to continue, right? So please, Kevin, start responding to the question now.
In this lecture, we've been presented to the fascinating topic of microscopes. That machines are used to have imagine 100 times bigger than real size. The first system is illumination system. It uses the transparency of the objects. And the second one is the magnification system. It uses the power. If you want a larger image, you have to use a high power.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, Kevin. Very good. All right. And let us finalize with Mateo. Please, Mateo. We're going to close, okay? So please help me with your response now.
Okay. In this listening, the professor talks about the topic of microscopes. She gave us a few tips to how to use it. She talks about the two principal systems. The first one is illuminating. This is how to control how much light you want in the specimen. It's very useful for transparent specimen. And the other one is magnification. How much zoom you want in the specimen. She also talks about focus. You can use it if you want more quality on the specimen. I'm
Great.
done.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So very good. All right, there you are. Well, what can I say about your responses, dear students, until this point? Well, fantastic. As I told you, I am, very much content with the quality of the students I'm receiving with your group. And I'm not going to give you personalized feedback this time, but tomorrow, trust me, I'm going to give you personal feedback word for word or word by word. So please, tomorrow, let us join together, all right? And we're going to be discussing and practicing for this task the entire time, all right? Before you go, please help me with your assistance. I'm going to take it, all right? And please as well help me with the traditional poll that we always feel. You know that you help me a lot, okay? So please help me with that. And also listen to your name. And if you have any question, anything that you could compliment and add to the response, please tell me. I'm going to be delighted to help you. Let's see what we have here. All right, so please listen to your names. Is here present Jasmine Azucena? With that?
Yes,
and
I'm
also
here.
listen to your name. And if you have any question, thank you very much. Okay, okay, thank you very much. There you are. What about Reyes Andre?
Here I am.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you very much. What about Paula Andrea?
Present.
Thank you very much, Andrea. What about Andrea Mercedes?
Here, I'm here.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Andrea. What about Alexander David?
Present.
Thank you very much, Alexander. What about Angel Indriago?
Present.
Thank you, Angel. What about Mateo Antesana?
I'm here.
Thank you very much, dear Mateo. What about Santiago Sergio?
Present.
Thank you very much, dear Sergio. Sara, your Sara Neda. I saw that Sara was here. I don't know what happened, but anyways. And Kevin Alcides.
Here, Professor.
Thank you very much. Kevin, well, thank you very much for your responses, your students. I'm going to see you tomorrow, all right, in order to continue with this. Remember to be in a quiet space and to have your microphone ready. Okay, we're going to close this section with the best you have. So please see you tomorrow and have a wonderful night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Goodbye.
Thank you very much, students. Thank you very much. Have a good night.